This is your first look at the all-new Mercedes CLA, and I really do mean all new. Mercedes says compared to the old CLA, this car is more refined, it's more efficient, it's more comfortable, and it's more intelligent. In fact, Mercedes says this is the cleverest car it's ever made. So we can split that intelligence into two halves. Firstly, there's the whole electric car side of things, and this is pretty interesting because it's the first Mercedes to use an 800 volt system. Now, I know what you're thinking, 800 volts means faster charging. You'd be right. Up to 320 kilowatts with this car. And Mercedes says, to put that into a bit of context, you can put 300 kilometers of range, that's about 186 miles, into the battery in just 10 minutes. It's barely time to get a coffee. It's also one of the most efficient EVs around today. Mercedes reckons it'll do 5 miles per kilowatt hour, and from the 85 kilowatt hour battery pack, they say it has a range of 492 miles. Obviously that will depend on how fast you drive, what the temperature is, how you're driving, all sorts of things, but 492 miles is pretty good. So there are going to be two versions of this car. The first has a 200 kilowatt hour motor driving the rear wheels through a new gearbox, a 2-speed gearbox, which is pretty rare among electric cars at the moment. We've only seen 1 or 2 other examples of that. The reason being, one gear is for acceleration and then another gear is for sort of more efficient, higher speed cruising. 0 to 62 time on that car, 6.7 seconds. The other version is going to be called the CLA 350 4MATIC, a little bit more powerful. This one's 260 kilowatts, and obviously there's a front motor as well for all-wheel drive, although that front motor can be decoupled when you're cruising to improve efficiency. Mercedes says for that car, 0 to 62 in 4.9 seconds. These figures aren't particularly quick, are they? I mean, that's absolutely fine. Manufacturers have been focusing far too much on delivering supercar-like performance from what are actually sensible saloon cars. So I actually quite like that Mercedes isn't focusing too much on ballistic performance. This car is the first Mercedes to sit on the all-new MMA platform. This platform has been designed to work with internal combustion cars and fully electric cars. Some say that might be a compromise, but Mercedes reckons it's got it just right with this one. And the obvious tell is that the internal combustion car rides a little bit higher, because obviously it doesn't have a battery in the floor. As well as being smarter and more refined than the previous model, it's also bigger in every dimension. It's taller, it's wider, it's longer, and it's also got a longer wheelbase than the previous generation of CLA. That means a little bit more room, especially on the second row. Speaking of practicality, there's also a frunk in this car. Mercedes hasn't normally done this with its EVs. There's normally no space in the front, but there is here just about enough space for a weekend bag or of course your charge cables. One of the biggest changes of this car is, well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's the front here. 142 stars, all twinkling away in what used to be the front grille. It's quite distinctive, isn't it? And of course you've got the glowing Mercedes badge in the middle. Now that won't appear in every market. There are very strict rules on whether you can have a glowing badge on the front of your car or not, and on the back as well. But Mercedes says it's worked a way around this one, and there it is, shining brightly, surrounded by, like I said, 142 individual star icons, and they're also replicated here too, in the headlights and also at the rear. Now these can be used for all sorts of things. They can show you the charge status of the car, how charged the battery is, and you can get them to play a little animation when you lock and unlock the car. If you're wondering about the matte black paint and the gold details on the wheels, the calipers, and quite a lot of the interior, this is part of what Mercedes is calling the Edition spec. We don't know yet if this is going to be coming to the UK. That's to be confirmed. We don't know which markets will get it. We don't know how many there will be, but there we go. It's interesting that Mercedes is sort of bundling a load of spec together in quite a distinctive way and calling it Edition. So inside the CLA, everything's as you'd expect, to be honest. You've got the super screen, nice thin rimmed steering wheel, lots of perforated leather. We like that. We've got the typical Mercedes air vents that look a little bit like engine turbines. They're pretty cool, and I think there's some lighting around those. Quite a lot of ambient lighting in here, actually. There are these floating door panels with lights behind them, which obviously you can have different colours. Like I said earlier, this is the Edition with the gold detailing, so we've got a little bit of gold on the kick plate there, on the floor mats, on the centre console. Speaking of the centre console here, you can get it in all sorts of different materials. They were showing us earlier, you can get your usual sort of leathers and woods, but there's even one made of paper. And you can get all sorts of different patterns and textures on there. It's quite interesting. I don't think I've seen that before. Ahead of that, obviously a wireless phone charger, a couple of ports down here. They can deliver 100 watts of power, so you could plug a laptop in if you wanted. Like I said, big super screen display. You've got the driver display ahead of you. I think that's about 10 inches. And then you've got 14-inch infotainment screen in the middle. And then optionally, you can have another 14-inch screen in front of the passenger. You can do all sorts with this. You can have streaming video, you can play games, there's an Xbox controller connected to this car. You can do all sorts with it, and the driver won't be distracted, Mercedes says, because there's a camera just here. And that's used for a few different things. It recognises you and then sets up your driver profile when you get in, which is nice. And it's also used for driver distraction. So if you're having a look to see what your passenger's doing on their streaming Xbox game, which you can get on here, it'll tell you off, basically. How well that works in the real world, I do not know, but that's why that camera is just there.